Hello, everybody. Today is Tuesday, October 17th, 2023. We are going to cover a whole bunch on today's show, including the latest what's going on in the Middle East with the ongoing war in Israel and Palestine. We're also, not to confuse, I'm going to get this mixed up a couple times today, but we're going to give a bit of an update on what's going on in East Palestine, Ohio, over here in the United States. A new report from Stephen Lester on the dioxins and other chemicals of concern in the East Palestine area. So a lot to get to ahead of all of this. You've also probably just been seeing wall-to-wall online today of the Speaker of the House. We're not really going to focus too much on that because it doesn't seem like that is going anywhere quickly at the moment. But for those of you just joining right now, I'm going to ask you to please smash the like button to help get this out to more folks. It helps us out quite a bit. It's a free, easy way to help us out here. And if you're seeing us for the first time as well, please hit the subscribe button down below. Again, it'll be a big show starting off with Israel and Palestine and then moving into East Palestine, Ohio. Over the weekend, we saw President Biden sat down with 60 Minutes for, in my opinion, what was a bit of a puff interview. Very easy questions. They discussed Israel and Palestine, among other things. But we also learned yesterday, just on Monday, that President Biden is actually going to be visiting Israel in person tomorrow. Again, that announcement was made yesterday. Seems to be pretty quick. I was a little bit surprised seeing it. Obviously, in the last year or so, we also saw President Biden visiting in Ukraine, visiting with Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. So this would be kind of the second visit to a country that's currently at war, a lot of it being funded by the United States. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. After meeting with President Netanyahu, President Biden later in the week was actually also supposed to be speaking with Palestinian President Abbas. It seems like at this point, President Abbas has canceled that meeting, according to some reporting. We'll see if anything breaks on that as we continue on in the show. But first, we're going to read a bit more about the upcoming visit. And I want to say, too, we are going to get to the kind of tragic story right now coming out of the hospital that was bombed in Palestine, in Gaza City. Reports of potentially hundreds of people dead. I will say there is a lot of blame being cast around. The Israelis are saying that this was a failed missile attempt by Hamas. Hamas is saying this was the Israelis. As with anything covering these sorts of stories where you've got an ongoing conflict like this, a legitimate war going on, the details are still going to be coming out. There's lots of information flying, misinformation flying. So we're gonna be careful to pass too much judgment. However, if this is indeed an attack from Israel, obviously that is a major offense. So we're going to keep an eye on that as things go. But first, let's take a look at what the upcoming visit from President Biden to Israel is going to look like. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up that article from CNN. President Joe Biden will visit Israel in high-stakes trip. President Joe Biden will make an extraordinary wartime visit to Israel this week as he seeks to demonstrate staunch support for the country as it works to eliminate Hamas while also pressuring for ways to ease humanitarian suffering in Gaza. The dueling objectives, spelled out by his top diplomat Monday evening, bring with them significant risks for the president as he works to prevent the crisis in the Middle East from widening. Aides say Biden has expressed a strong interest in making the journey after being invited over the weekend by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whom Biden has known for 4 decades. He spent Monday deliberating over the trip at the White House with his top national security and intelligence advisors. Meanwhile, in Tel Aviv, Secretary of State Antony Blinken was convening a marathon session with top Israeli officials to discuss opening Gaza to humanitarian aid and preventing civilians from getting caught up in Israel's response to the terror attacks. Preventing civilians from getting caught up has been not successful so far. Neither has humanitarian aid. We'll get into those shortly. In announcing Biden's Wednesday trip, after more than 7 hours of negotiations, Blinken said the United States and Israel have agreed to a plan that will enable humanitarian aid from donor nations and multilateral organizations to reach civilians in Gaza. The U.S. president will also travel to Jordan, where he'll meet with King Abdullah II, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi of Egypt and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. That part right there, I believe, has been updated in other stories because that meeting may not be happening. The top U.S. diplomat in recent days has met separately with the three leaders, all of whom have condemned the situation in Gaza. The security risks of a diplomatic visit to Israel were starkly illustrated Monday when Blinken, in his meeting with Netanyahu, was forced to shelter in place after air sirens warned of incoming rockets. White House officials say they'd carefully weighed the risks of a presidential visit and deemed it safe enough for both to execute and announce ahead of time. The president's visit will build on Blinken's 7-nation multi-day tour of the Middle East, which comes as the U.S. tries to strike a delicate balance of providing unwavering support for Israel's military operations while mitigating the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and stopping the war from spreading to future fronts. I'm going to skip down a little bit here. A visit with strategic importance. In weighing Netanyahu's invitation with his team, Biden factored in both the symbolism of a visit and its practicalities. Aside from the high-profile show of support for Israel, the trip will send a warning to other players in the region, namely Iran and Hezbollah proxy in Lebanon, about becoming further engaged in the conflict. But it will also link Biden more closely with the Israeli response in Gaza, including concerns over mounting humanitarian crisis, and could act as a tacit endorsement of Netanyahu's decision. Couple key points that I want to go over from this visit. Obviously, that article does continue. If you're interested in checking it out, you can find that on CNN. One thing that they mention is that it's important for aid to be flowing into Gaza as soon as possible. And as of right now, that aid does not seem to be getting in. All of the borders from Palestine into Israel have been closed this entire time. You do have one border with Egypt. You'll hear it referred to as Rafah. That border has been closed for the duration of this. There was some reports that it might open a little bit at some point today. I don't think that ended up happening. But again, with this, so many different conflicting reports of everything going on the ground. You also have, the situation where, okay, no aid is getting it in. And meanwhile, over a week ago, Israel did cut power and water going from Israel into Palestine. Palestine generally relied on that coming in from Israel. They haven't been able to, I'm sure they've tried to, but they haven't been able to, because of the blockades and everything going on, to be able to actually have their own, power generations. They did have some of them. I believe they've been damaged at this point. So you essentially have over 2 million people in Gaza with no power, no clean water, and no humanitarian aid getting in. You've got the United States essentially condemning Hamas of their attacks, as they should, because the attacks from Hamas were horrific, especially on civilians. But you don't have the United States condemning Israel for cutting off water, power, and in many cases aid to just the millions of civilians that are stuck in Gaza presently. So that's a major thing here. This is also going to link Biden more closely, as it said in the end here, aligning the U.S. aligning more with Netanyahu and the Israelis here could be a bit of a slippery slope. I mean, at this point, we talked about the politics that Biden is going through in the United States last week. To look at this from a political lens for a second here, which is terrible to do because the human tragedy it should be the main focus. But with all of this, the political games going on behind the scenes are really important as well. Biden slipping in the polls here at home. He's doing terribly in in his approval ratings, all of these things. Maybe grasping onto the idea that he can get a win in the Middle East here is maybe something that they're trying to do. I don't see that happening. I mean, this is an issue that's been going on for 75 years. There's been on and off fighting in Gaza, in Palestine, in Israel over this sort of thing. So, the bar for a major success, I guess, would be a big lift for a Biden administration if they go in and surely do negotiate something. But man, the risks of this just continuing and it just looking bad politically for Biden way outweigh this, in my opinion, at this stage of the game. But I want to dig into this a little bit further And we can actually look at some of these clips from the 60 Minutes interview that Biden did over the weekend. Again, it's a very much a puff piece interview. We'll take a look at some of it here, specifically on humanitarian aid first. Before we play the clip, though, please smash the like button down below. For those of you who are just joining us, we can surely get this out to more folks. We got over 150 people watching at the moment. If we can smash that like button, we can get it out to even more. Let's go ahead, though, and play that first clip of President Biden on 60 Minutes earlier this weekend.
There are about 2 million people in Gaza. As you know, Mr. President, 2 million people trapped. About half of them are children. Are you asking Israel to establish a humanitarian corridor in that area or get humanitarian supplies?
Yes, our team is talking with them about that and whether there could be a safe zone. We're also talking with the Egyptians, whether there's an outlet to get these children and women out out of that area at this moment. But it's hard.
You would like to see a humanitarian corridor that allows some of the 2 million Gazans out of the area?
Yes.
You would like to see humanitarian supplies brought into Gaza?
Yes.
So he wants there to be a humanitarian corridor. He wants there to be humanitarian supplies. He wants this stuff to go in through Egypt, right? However, you would need, first off, a whole lot less humanitarian supplies. I mean, surely a lot of them need to go, but maybe calling Israel and saying, hey, maybe you should not have cut the power to all of these people. Maybe you should have not cut the water to all of these people, to the point where you now have folks resorting, in some reports that we're seeing, to drinking contaminated water because they don't have an option. So they're drinking bad water, which leads to more folks getting sick, which leads to more folks going to hospitals that are overwhelmed and being bombed. Again, I'm going to be careful on saying who it's being bombed by because we don't necessarily know at this stage. Both parties are currently blaming the opposite party. Lots of conflicting reports. Not going to get into who we think is doing it necessarily, but we're here clearly condemning one side of this and not the other, as far as or making the real actions to actually try to get some of these things done. Sure, wants to have a humanitarian corridor. That's great and all. We're now at death tolls into the thousands on both sides of this. It's going to be tricky to do, especially with the potential threat of a ground invasion into Gaza coming from the Israelis. As far as the condemnation goes, though, Biden was sort of in a roundabout way asked about this in the 60 Minutes interview. Not directly, though, and there's this line of questioning to me was so interesting, especially in the last one, even, where he's just being asked yes or no questions. But that's besides the point. We can go ahead and play this next clip where he sort of asked about this on 60 Minutes again.
So you do not agree with the Israeli total siege of the Gaza Strip?
I'm confident that Israel is going to act under the rules of war. There's a standards that democratic institutions and countries go by, and so I'm confident that there's going to be an ability for the innocents in Gaza to be able to have access to medicine and food and water.
Would you support Israeli occupation of Gaza at this point?
I think it'd be a big mistake. Look, what happened in Gaza, in my view, is Hamas and the extreme elements of Hamas don't represent all the Palestinian people. And I think that it would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza again. But to going in and taking out the extremists, the Hezbollah is up north, but Hamas down south is a necessary requirement.
Beyond the fact that President Biden there is just not sounding great during this interview overall, no wonder why his poll numbers are not doing great and folks think he's a little bit too old for the job. But he says he's confident Israel will follow the rules of war. He's confident Israel will follow the rules of war. Again, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but following the rules of war does not align with cutting the water supply and power supply to 2 million people, to 2 million civilians who just live here and have not been able to leave, also because they've been under a blockade, essentially, living in many horrific conditions, frankly, in Palestine in a lot of cases. Cutting those sorts of resources to innocent people is something that the United States, for the most part, at least pretends to be against in a lot of cases. And I don't want to necessarily equate these two things to being the same thing, but when this came to the war in Eastern Europe between currently the Ukraine and Russia, when Russia was doing things that were targeting civilians, the United States had a whole lot to say about it. And in this case, it really doesn't seem like it so far. I actually went and pulled some clips from about a year ago when, at the time, Secretary of State Antony Blinken was discussing this sort of thing happening. He had some pretty choice words for what the United States had to say about doing things that target innocent civilians that we have not heard thus far in this instance with Israel and Palestine. Colin, we can go ahead and play that first clip of Antony Blinken.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're meeting at a critical juncture. As Ukraine continues to seize momentum on the battlefield, President Putin has focused his ire and his fire on Ukraine's civilian population. Over the past several weeks, Russia has bombed out more than a third of Ukraine's energy system, plunging millions into cold, into darkness, as frigid temperatures set in. Heat, water, electricity, for children, for the elderly, for the sick. These are President Putin's new targets. He's hitting them hard. This brutalization of Ukraine's people is barbaric.
So about a year ago, cutting water, literally something Antony Blinken mentioned directly right there, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, is barbaric. Has anyone heard the word barbaric used when we're talking about cutting water to Palestinians? Now, I want to be clear here. I'm seeing some folks in the comments, and I encourage folks to definitely comment, and please, again, smash the like button if you're watching this. But I do try to keep an eye on some of the comments. Super chats, I will read all of them at the end of the show. Those are very much appreciated. But I want to be clear. Hamas absolutely are being terrorists here. They're bad, no doubt about it. You're not saying otherwise at all. But at the same token, the response isn't to do harm to innocent civilians who are caught up in this. The response, sure, go ahead and take out Hamas in whatever way you can. But when it starts to get into the situation where you have hundreds and hundreds of civilians dying in the process, there's a big fucking problem. Pardon my French. That's not okay. I'm not okay with civilians being tied into this at all. I think that Hamas's attack on the Israeli music festival is abhorrent. It's disgusting. Just like I think the attacks that have been done on so many Palestinians at this point are as well. The amount of Palestinian lives lost due to so many of these missile strikes coming from Israel is ridiculous. I'm hearing so many people just talking about how, it's war, like shit happens, is disgusting, especially when we're talking about literally just like innocent human lives at stake here. So I just wanted to be clear that no one's saying that Hamas isn't. No one is saying that Hamas is a good guy here. They're not. They're 100% not. But at the same token, we need to also make sure that Israel, in its response, is not doing horrific shit back to them. That's the point that I'm trying to make. And when a year ago the United States calls another country doing basically the same thing, cutting water to civilians, barbaric, and then at the same token we're meeting with the president or the prime minister of a country that's doing the exact same thing, it doesn't really equate here. There's one other clip from Blinken back about a year ago talking about the same sort of thing. Let's play the other clip as well.
Are the wars in Israel and
Yesterday,
President Biden said that, in his opinion, war crimes have been committed in Ukraine. Personally, I agree. Intentionally targeting civilians is a war crime. After all the destruction of the past 3 weeks, I find it difficult to conclude that the Russians are doing otherwise.
So again, another statement from, again, this isn't, this is a top level official, obviously Anthony Blinken being the Secretary of State of the United States. And I see a comment saying all these wars going on right now makes me anxious. I agree. This is terrible. You really don't see a clear end to this. And what we saw this afternoon with the bombing at a Palestinian hospital in Gaza City is extremely concerning. Again, I'm going to say for the 10th time here, we don't necessarily know what happened here. Initially, Hamas is saying that this was a missile attack from Israel. The Israelis initially said that they're investigating. Now, some Israeli officials are saying that it wasn't them. This was a failed rocket strike from Hamas. Videos were circulating that were not accurate of this, saying, oh, here's the video of the failed rocket strike. They were from 2022. So we really don't know. However, I am just saying that this is a lot of stuff that's going on. We can pull up an article here, though, from the AP that highlights a little bit of what's going on with this attack at the hospital. Colin, if we can go ahead and pull up that article from the AP here. Let's see. Oh, my headline is different than yours on my screen here. That's kind of funny. Oh, here we go. Okay. Well, blast kills hundreds at Gaza hospital. Hamas and Israel trade blame as Biden heads to the Middle East. I believe the article should be the same here. A massive blast rocked a Gaza City hospital. Packed. You know what, Colin? Here, I'll read. Do you mind just refreshing? There you go. Thanks. A massive blast rocked a Gaza City hospital packed with wounded and other Palestinians seeking shelter Tuesday, killing hundreds of people, the Hamas-run health ministry said. Hamas blamed an Israeli airstrike, while the Israeli military said the hospital was hit by a rocket misfired by Palestinian militants. The health ministry said at least 500 people had been killed. Video that the Associated Press confirmed was from the hospital showed fire engulfing the building and the hospital's grounds strewn with torn bodies, many of them young children. Around them in the grass were blankets, school backpacks, and other belongings. I'm going to continue to read. I want to be clear here, though, that this article has been updated in the last half an hour or so since we pulled this together. So there is some new information coming in here. This is coming from the AP. So again, they're likely doing their due diligence, but let's take it with a grain of salt as this is happening in real time, essentially. The carnage came as the U.S. tried to convince Israel to allow the delivery of supplies to desperate civilians, aid groups, and hospitals in the tiny Gaza Strip, which has been under a complete siege since Hamas's deadly rampage in southern Israel last week. It also came a day before President Joe Biden was due to visit the region to show support for Israel and to try to prevent the war from spreading. Hundreds of Palestinians had taken refuge in Al-Ali and other hospitals in Gaza City in past days, hoping they would be spared bombardment after Israel ordered all residents of the city and surrounding areas to evacuate to the southern Gaza Strip. Hamas called Tuesday's hospital strike, quote, a horrific massacre, saying it was caused by an Israeli strike. You can see on the map here, hospitals in the center of Gaza City, essentially, which is in the evacuation zone at this point. But again, folks really not having a lot of places to go. We'll continue reading below. The Israeli military, however, said Palestinian militants had fired a barrage of rockets near the hospital at the time. Intelligence from multiple sources we have in our hands indicate that Islamic Jihad is responsible for the failed rocket launch. It says ambulances and private cars rushed some 350 casualties from the Al-Ali blast to Gaza City's main hospital, Al-Shifa, already overwhelmed with wounded from other strikes, says its director, Mohammed Abu Selmiya. The wounded were laid onto bloody floors, screaming in pain. So obviously, pretty horrific here. Not the situation that anyone wants to be seeing. It sounds like now it is confirmed that we at least have hundreds injured, potentially killed in this. Again, initially the initial response, initial reporting on this was taking Hamas's word for it. It sounds like the AP has gotten video of some of this, and they've been speaking with folks in other hospitals. So, yeah, I mean, it's another in the terrible long list of tragedies going on in this whole crisis. Not long after this announcement about the hospital bombing, explosion, rocket, whatever it may be, happened, I did notice that President Abbas of Palestine decided to cancel his meeting with President Biden. This is a short article here, short clip. It basically just says right here on ABC News, senior Palestinian official says President Mahmoud Abbas canceled his planned meeting Wednesday with President Biden. A senior Palestinian official says President Mahmoud Abbas canceled his planned meeting on Wednesday with the president. That was earlier this afternoon that happened. It was basically right after this incident at the hospital. You know, it could be an attack. We'll call it an attack because regardless of who did it, it's clearly an attack. But we don't necessarily know who it is at this point. There's going to be some sort of investigation going on to figure this out. But that was something that I looked at and said, well, you know, if Israel were to blame for this, if I was the Palestinian president and Joe Biden were going to go meet with Netanyahu, you know, continuing to kind of say, give them the support, say that they're confident they're going to play by the rules, yada, yada, yada. And then this happens. If I'm President Abbas, I'm potentially canceling that meeting as well. There is one last clip I want to play from the 60 Minutes interview that went on over the weekend again, when President Biden was asked if the United States can afford to essentially wage a war in Ukraine and Israel at the same time. Were we able to do that? I think you can guess what he had to say, but let's take a listen.
Are the wars in Israel and Ukraine more than the United States can take on at the same time?
We're the United States of America, for God's sake. The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world. We can take care of both of these and still maintain our overall international defense. We have the capacity to do this, and we have an obligation to. We are the essential nation, as to paraphrase the former Secretary of State. And if we don't, who does?
Yep, I can just picture the industrial complex, military industrial complex folks grinning from ear to ear, hearing cash register noises in the background. Of course, we can afford to wage two wars at once. For the United States of America, war is what we do. War is how the machine keeps moving, essentially. This is unfortunately just the reality of our system right now. Is so many of our elected officials are going to profit off of this. I already saw, for those of you who don't know, Unusual Whales, they generally follow like congressional stock trading, all that sort of stuff. I already saw some of the reports just of like members of Congress trading stocks on this who bought a bunch of military industrial complex stocks like Raytheon and all of that sort of stuff leading up to this. They're all going to make a pretty penny on this, you can bet. And that's not even mentioning the just essentially revolving door of folks moving from their work in politics, whether they be members of Congress or staffers to members of Congress, who then essentially finish their duty and they move on to their next duty of collecting $500,000 a year to go sit on a board for one of these big companies. But of course, there was no strings attached between what they voted on when they were a member of Congress and getting that ridiculous paycheck sitting in those board positions or anything like that. That would be outrageous. That would never happen, right? That would never happen. So these people are grinning from ear to ear for sure. As this goes on, you know, I don't know what else to say about it, honestly. There is no winning this, I would say, right now. I just don't see an end to it. A ceasefire would be fantastic, but I really don't see them coming to the table. Again, I would love to see that, but at this point, I'm not even hearing a real answer as to what the negotiation is. So we'll continue to kind of follow this as it goes and bring you new updates on it throughout the week to see if anything happens. If anything happens during the show and Colin notices it, we'll bring it out if we get more information on the hospital bombing or anything like that. And here he comes.
I was going to say, Jordan had sent also this tweet, if you want, or that Rashida Tlaib had done actually calling out Biden, if you want to
sure.
read
Yeah,
that.
All right. So from Rashida Tlaib, Israel just bombed the Baptist. So Rashida Tlaib going essentially right, saying Israel did it. So Israel just bombed the Baptist hospital, killing 500 Palestinians, doctors, children, and patients, just like that. At POTUS, this is what happens when you refuse to facilitate a ceasefire and help de-escalate. Your war and destruction only approach has opened my eyes, and many Palestinian American and Muslim Americans like me, we will remember where you stood. So Rashida Tlaib probably has better information than I do. I'm still going to put a take it with a grain of salt at this point. We don't necessarily know that this was the Israelis. Again, both sides kind of saying the opposite. We will see, but I mean, being real here, it does feel like they would have more, I don't know. I don't know is the answer. However, again, if this does indeed turn out to look like this is the Israelis, and President Biden continues with this meeting, continues with this continuous, flow of aid, which many of our elected leaders, I will say, are all on board with. We need to take a good, long, hard look and see what it is we're actually paying for. It's not great. Again, I don't even know what to say. Hearts go out to folks who are needing to deal with this as their everyday right now. But we'll keep an eye on this as it continues to develop. In a second here, I'm going to move on to East Palestine. So we're no longer in the Middle East. We're going to talk about East Palestine, Ohio. Those of you probably remember that I've been back and forth. Sorry, we are going to have a guest joining us for this, hopefully, in 10 minutes or so. But I've been on the ground over 4 different trips reporting in East Palestine, Ohio. I know we have a lot of new viewers since the United Auto Workers strike. If you haven't seen some of the East Palestine coverage, I'll go over a little bit of it right now before we get into a new report from Stephen Lester of the Center for Health and Environmental Justice. We're going to go into the details of that in a little bit here, but it's Status Coup is one of the only outlets who kind of continued to cover this story on and on and on over the last 8-9 months of this still. So whether it's covering East Palestine, Ohio, the United Auto Workers strike, whatever it may be, we are one of the only independent outlets who actually goes on the ground to these places, talks to workers on the picket line, talks to folks in East Palestine, Ohio, talks to folks from Jackson, Mississippi, Flint, Michigan, wherever it may be, and tries to understand the actual lived experience of folks in these places, while so many other people fail to do so and try to report on those same stories. If you are able to help us out at all to be able to make sure that we can continue to do this sort of reporting, statuscoup.com/join is the place to do so. We're going to keep an eye on stories that we can't necessarily go cover on the ground like we just did here, but what we like to focus on the most is where we can go and actually speak with residents on the ground in so many of these places across the United States, because while there are plenty of problems abroad that our government is so willing to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars to go try to solve, we won't consider spending that money here at home. President Biden's going to be going to Israel tomorrow. I mentioned he went to Ukraine almost a year ago at this point. He has still yet to go to East Palestine, Ohio, even though it has been 9 months. A little ridiculous if you ask me. statuscoup.com/join is the place to go if you are interested in helping us out there. Again, though, I mentioned we had a new report from Stephen Lester from the Center for Health and Environmental Justice on some new dioxin, not new dioxin testing, but a report on the dioxin testing that had been done by the EPA. For those of you who don't know, dioxin is one of the most harmful chemicals known to man, and it is one of the many things that was created when the 5 cars of vinyl chloride were combusted in the village of East Palestine. Again, that explosion of those chemicals, we learned in June during an NTSB hearing, did not actually need to happen, and there very likely was a much better approach to be taken. Instead, Norfolk Southern essentially forced that option, causing the detonation of 5 cars of vinyl chloride in this small town. Just days later, residents were told it was safe to return home. On one of our early reporting trips in East Palestine, I had the pleasure to speak with Stephen Lester in person. We saw him at a town hall event And this is really the first time that a lot of folks learned about the harmful effects of dioxin. I'm going to let you listen directly to him to get a little bit of an overview of this, and then we'll get into more, of the details on the other side. Colin, go ahead and play the clip of Stephen Lester in East Palestine.
Dioxins, this category, there's like 75 of these dioxins. One of them is the most toxic chemical ever tested in the United States. And so dioxin is an extraordinarily toxic substance. It causes cancer, reproductive problems, developmental problems, immune system problems, diabetes. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So, but these are all subtle effects that will affect people over the life of their lives. EPA had to know when they were going to burn vinyl chloride that dioxin would be formed. It's criminal that they didn't come forward with that. And I think it's in some ways up to the folks in this room and in this town to hold them accountable. Them and, of course, Norfolk Southern.
She referred me to the on-site coordinator for the federal EPA for this cleanup. He told me that they were not testing for dioxins, that they're in the acute emergency phase, and he said he didn't want to dismiss the concern over that, but there's a process that they were using. He told me that they've been using, since the Friday night, the time of the actual derailment, they've been taking 24-hour Summa canisters testing samples, which is and they send them off to get analyzed. And that is a sample that goes in greater detail about what is actually in the air. And so he said all those test results had not been released to the public yet.
They weren't looking for something they didn't want to find. But I think what we're looking at is a dioxin problem.
Okay.
All of the symptoms I'm seeing people are having with the chloroacne.
Explain that. So the chloroacne is the rashes that...
is one of the probably more subtle symptoms of toxic poisoning. Particularly with dioxins.
So he mentioned one symptom right there. Again, though, dioxins are one of the most harmful chemicals known to man. It's a carcinogen. It can cause birth defects, all sorts of additional things here. We do have a guest standing by. I'm not going to bring them in just yet. I want to read one little section here. Colin, I'm going to skew a little bit here. If you don't mind just pulling up the bottom half of page 1. And I'll read a little bit of the bottom half of page 1 and page 2 of Stephen Lester's report here. Exactly right there. Perfect. We'll go through a couple of the findings in this report that Stephen Lester has put out. And then we're actually going to speak with some East Palestine residents just to get an update on the situation on the ground there of what's going on, how folks are feeling, any potential health effects still going on, and that sort of thing here. So the key findings, though, in regards to this dioxin testing, and I will say, we do have Stephen Lester booked to be on the show tomorrow. So if you are interested in this, tomorrow at 5, we will have Stephen Lester on the show to go through this in more detail. That I'm excited that we're going to be able to have him on to talk about this. So the key findings so far: the initial sampling plan developed by Arcadis for Norfolk Southern and approved by the EPA was never intended to identify public health risks posed by the contamination in the community caused by the derailment and subsequent intentional burning of vinyl chloride. So the sampling plan was not done, again, to address public health risks, which is insane. The approach for determining where to collect samples used by Arcadis for Norfolk Southern and approved by the EPA was highly unusual and very subjective and did not follow standard procedures for investigating contaminated sites. Norfolk Southern sampling plan involved walking the area and inspecting the surface soil for evidence of ash or other debris from the derailment and subsequent intentional burn. For folks who don't know, dioxin is essentially invisible. These are really, really small particles. There does not need to be ash present for there to be dioxin present. Despite the many limitations in EPA's testing approach, some sample measurements did detect significant levels of dioxin a significant number of samples that were collected as part of EPA's dioxin sampling effort in East Palestine did exceed EPA and other benchmarks and guidelines for evaluating the public health risks of dioxin and warranted additional action. Yet, the EPA has refused to conduct additional testing or take any action to address these findings. It goes on here with quite a bit of detail. This is a 17-page document that Stephen Lester put together. Again, he's a toxicologist who is working with the Center for Health and Environmental Justice. He's spoken at several East Palestine-related events, trying to help folks get answers to so many of these questions that the EPA, frankly, is not answering. With that, though, I'm not going to make them wait any longer. We do have two folks from East Palestine, or from the East Palestine area, who are with us live here. Colin, we can go ahead and bring in Ashley and Matt. Good to see you both. Can you guys hear me okay? Oh, I can't hear you.
Yep, we can hear you.
There we go. Gotcha. First off, thank you guys so much for taking the time to join me today. I guess first off, just kind of basic level here. We've talked before, but not everyone here might not know who you are necessarily. How have things been so far? Just to give folks a little bit of an idea, Ashley and Matt have been relocated temporarily, but it feels like it's been a lot more than temporary at this point. It's been a while, to a hotel just outside of East Palestine. How are you guys holding up, and what is the general feeling around East Palestine at this point in time?
We're kind of to a point now where we're just accepting it. It was horrible in the beginning months. I think maybe the last month the past month, we're starting to get more acclimated and understand, hey, this is what's going to happen. We still don't like it, and we would still love to move on with our lives. And closer we get to holidays, we realize it more. But honestly, being in town and experiencing the symptoms, it's not worth it. So it's better to be in a hotel. At least we're safe. And that's kind of how I've become to accept things a lot easier. I'm not sure if Matt's had a difficult time too.
Right. Yeah.
It's been difficult. Like especially being displaced and staying in a place that you didn't work your whole life to, build up to live in, and then to be displaced into a place that just has people coming in and out. It's ridiculous. It sucks. Right. It's not, there's no good thing about this, but
other than the people that are here.
Right. Some of the people we have built relationships with, and it feels like, we have become family, good people.
Right. But you don't want to have to do that under the circumstances, essentially.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You wish it was under better circumstances. And I said this the last time I saw y'all back in August. When I walked into the hotel, I was staying in the same hotel, and I saw Candy pretty quickly after I walked in, and I was like, oh, like, it's great to see you, but at the same token, I wish I wasn't seeing you still like stuck
under
in this
the
hotel.
circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. I guess can you give folks an idea of what are folks' major concerns right now? Are people still having health concerns, symptoms? What does that sort of look like at this stage of the game? Whether it's personally with you all or with folks that you're friends with, family with in town.
It seems like it's escalating. So the same symptoms that were around the beginning are still there. We're just having more people recognize it, or, they're realizing maybe it's not stress. There's no way this is stress, or this is caused by something in my environment other than the derailment. Nothing's changed. People are still having nosebleeds. I even put out a message on Facebook to see if some people wanted to say what they think symptom-wise. Nosebleeds are still around. We're having issues with vision where people have to go get their eyes checked, and some people are getting told it's chemical burns. Some people are being told that their vision is just affected and there's no explanation. But we're seeing that a lot more dominant than what we would.
What the acne?
Yeah, there's more acne. My son is 7 and he has acne. like actual acne. So I'm not sure if it is a hormone disruptor, something that's going on like that. It doesn't look like chloracne though.
Right. And I spoke with the resident today who I'm hoping to get a chance to interview. She hasn't done anything on Status Coup before, who was, she lives east of the derailment site over in Darlington, Pennsylvania, where I know your family lives. But the description from her, I mean, she's lost a lot of her hair, or was losing her hair. I've heard that from a couple other folks as well. Just her like symptoms and it's not just one or two people. It's seeming like some of these things. And again, it's the unfortunate reality is it's difficult to prove a lot of this stuff. The EPA, especially when you've got, agencies like the EPA, who, as I was reading in that last report, but that's just one small drop in the bucket compared to the things that the EPA has been doing incorrectly in this whole ordeal, where they're not, doing their sampling plans based on public health measures. It's just hard to necessarily 100% nail it down and be like, yes, this is related to this. But yeah, some of these new health concerns are scary to see.
And neurological symptoms are still going on. Still seizures, still tingling and numbness in your fingers that aren't caused by these VOCs that I can find. I mean, I search all of these symptoms and I can't really find anything VOC related that would cause that even now, unless the testing hasn't been done properly for their own records, and it should be done in a better manner. But just like the person you were speaking of, I'm losing my hair, and it's about, I don't know if anyone can remember seeing me on here before, but my hair on this side is what I would have on one side normally. I've lost about 50% of my hair. You can see where the breaking is and it's sticking out. It feels like almost wig hair, plasticky. And I don't know if it's atmosphere in the air or if it's water that's damaging it, but I'm noticing I can't run my fingers through it. It's falling out. I'm having rashes on my scalps a lot more. Teeth issues I'm having, and other people now are starting to see that their enamel on their teeth isn't like what it was. There's a lot more issues with cavities, teeth getting pulled, teeth just coming out in a hole, just completely coming out of your gums and almost looking like it's cauterized. So there's some serious issues.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you mentioned seizures too. On my last trip in East Palestine, I spoke with a resident. I believe her name was Amanda, and that interview is on the channel. And for folks who are watching right now, if you want to see some of our East Palestine interviews, I mean, I've lost count at this point. I've probably interviewed over 50 residents when those videos are here on the channel. If you want to see more of some of those experience that folks are going through. You could probably say experiments too, frankly. Unfortunately, experiment lab rats of Norfolk Southern and frankly, the United States government alongside of letting them essentially get away with this pretty unscathed. I mean, sure, they're paying some penalties and fines, but not nearly enough, in my opinion. You can check those out here on the channel. But yeah, it's the situation. It was so frustrating going back in August, and we'll be back again at some point soon, I'm sure. To just see the fact that, number one, folks were still having these health symptoms, but number two, y'all haven't had the chance to be made whole and actually leave. For folks who want to leave, it's still so difficult. It's not like you can just be like, yep, I want to get rid of my house, and like someone will just like cut you a check or something so that you can even just get the value of what your house was. Sure, there are some deals that some people will be offered something, other people won't be, but folks who want to leave cannot leave in some cases. And you add into the situation that, it's not necessarily a particularly wealthy area. So folks don't have just piles of cash sitting around. Not that many folks have piles of cash sitting around these days in general to just pick up and go move to another house. We spoke with resident Lonnie Miller last time there, who she told us that she actually had just, she was fortunate enough to be able to figure out getting another house, but she was like, I have no idea how we're going to pay for this second mortgage while we're still trying to sell our existing house. And the situation folks have been put in has been, it's unconscionable that that's how we've let it happen. Go ahead, Matt.
Kind of ridiculous. I mean, I drove through town today. I went because I had to go to my PCP to be able to get verification for testing at another place for heavy metals and blood testing and stuff. But there's like a brand new park that's beside the post office. Brand new park. It's like a fenced in place with a little pavilion. Brand new. It's like they're just dressing it up. They're just dressing it up to look like something.
Right. It's putting lipstick on a pig, essentially, spending money on things that, sure, it's great to have.
It don't matter. It's not helping anybody.
And on our downtime, we have to go to the doctor. So his day off, or he had to call off of work to go and see what he can do. Because, I mean, we're all having health issues. So now he has to take that time. No one's ever going to be able to enjoy these things they're putting there.
Right. Yeah, no, frankly, it's ridiculous when basic things like medical care, testing, whatever it may be, are not being taken care of. Meanwhile, they're spending money on parks, they're spending money on, spend whatever it may be, things that are not going to actually improve the day-to-day lives of folks, things that are not going to actually allow people to get out of town. It's pretty ridiculous. We'll move on to finishing up the show here. But I wanted to thank you both for coming on and chatting with us to give a little bit of an update.
No problem.
We're gonna, again, tomorrow we'll have Stephen Lester, who is the man behind the Dioxin report that I read just a little bit of it just now on to kind of go through some of his findings in more detail. We'll definitely stay in touch and have you back on in the future. Ashley knows that we're constantly texting back and forth with different stuff. So thank you both so much for taking the time and for giving folks an idea of what's going on the ground in East Palestine right now.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. So again, that was Ashley and Matt. We met Ashley, I believe, on the first trip to East Palestine initially. And she's just, one of so many of the residents that we've tried to stay in touch with, even while we are gone, not in East Palestine at the moment. We are hoping to get back there again, just like so many other things. We'd like to get back out on the UAW picket line, so many other places. If you are able to support our reporting to make sure that we can continue our on-the-ground reporting in these places, statuscoup.com/join is the place to do so. And again, tomorrow we're going to have Stephen Lester on the show. He's a toxicologist. He can answer a whole lot of questions as far as health concerns go, as far as testing goes, all of this sort of stuff. So I'm excited to be able to chat with him. The first time that I talked to him in that clip that we played in the beginning was kind of the beginning stages of, frankly, me even learning so much about these chemicals. I'm excited to talk to him a lot about specifically the dioxin stuff first and foremost, which is in his report, but also, what is it that can, potentially be causing folks like Ashley and so many others to still be having these health concerns in the first place. Frankly, it's pretty ridiculous that we are, again, 8-9 months later, and folks are still having these concerns going on in the village of East Palestine and surrounding areas. And the federal government, basically nowhere to be seen. I mean, now we've got the executive order from President Biden. I went through the executive order in a video. It's pretty flimsy at best. There is now a FEMA coordinator appointed to the area. So they've got that, but it's a lot of relying on the EPA and other federal agencies who had been there to try to, figure out what's going on. It's not great. If you want to get the full lowdown on what's in that executive order, the video is here on the channel. Hit the subscribe button, and if we do any updates on it, you will see those there as well. But overall, a bit of a shit show in the stage of everything, in the state of everything right now. It's you've got what's going on in Israel and Palestine. You've got what's going on in Ukraine. We're very concerned about those things, but so many places here at home are just, I feel for folks in so many of these other places. I do, but at the same token, we need to be focused on so many of our issues here at home when folks are struggling to get by with so many different things, whether it be being poisoned by billion-dollar corporations like Norfolk Southern, by essentially poor decisions at the government level in Flint, Michigan, or other parts of the country, Jackson, Mississippi, wherever it may be, or auto workers rising together and, trying to get a fair contract for a fair wage and help essentially drive up, the middle class and help make sure that folks get paid a decent wage, whether you're in a union or not. We really want to try to stay focused on so many of those issues that you can make a real difference on here at home. With that, I am going to start to wrap this up. I will be here again, though, tomorrow, 5 p.m. with Stephen Lester on the channel. That'll be the top of the show. We'll also cover additional breaking news, whatever is going on tomorrow. It might be Speaker of the House, might be another update from Israel. However, that we'll see. Things are moving fast. But definitely, if you're not subscribed already, please hit the subscribe button down below so that you don't miss that Stephen Lester interview tomorrow. With all of that, let's see if we had any super chats in the show. I'm not sure. We do have a new member, so that's great. New member, Angel Michael. I like the cat icon there. That's fun. Thank you so much, Angel, for becoming a member here on YouTube, I believe. And yeah, I believe that's it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, we really appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great night.